Good morning, everyone, and thank you to Kevin for presenting that very insightful presentation. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Vula Hantsiantonakis. I am a senior client consulting manager, and I support a lot of our EMEA and UK clients to inform and execute on their marketing campaigns and their sales strategies using data intent. So in this morning's session, and we'll bring our speakers up in just a couple minutes, we're going to focus on how alignment between marketing and sales is crucial to ensure that your organization sees success through its pipeline stages. But prior to delving into the discussion, I'd like to quickly highlight some relevant research from our recent media consumption study that I think will give you some helpful perspective on the IT research journey as it relates to sales and marketing aligning together. So this is hot off the press. We just completed our 2018 media consumption study. And this year we focused a few questions on how research is being done. And the results are based on responses from 450 IT European professionals. And what we're seeing, and this is no surprise to us here at TechTarget, is that the IT purchase journey really starts online and via peer engagement. So as a marketer, making sure you're connected to the organic flow of the purchase cycle is going to be important. What our survey respondents also told us is that on average, they're getting 3 to 4 vendor emails per week and 2 vendor calls per week. On top of that, they're doing a lot of independent research, conducting their own solution-related research, and working to build up their own shortlists. So there's a lot of craziness going on in an IT professional's life, right? They're getting contacted all the time. They're trying to find the information that they need to make their IT purchases. As an IT vendor, it's important that you then try to break through the crowd. And it's all about engaging and relating to that researcher. And that is done best through topic association. We see the most popular response to the question on screen is, if the offer is related to the product or service I've recently been researching, I will engage. So if your content, if your outreach, if your the calling script, if you will, actually relates to the intent, to the interest that that researcher actually has at that point in time, you will get an engagement from them. And one last point, you probably hear this from us all the time for those of you that do work with us. If you are looking to engage with IT researchers from regions out, from non-English speaking regions, especially DACH and France, it is absolutely vital that you are able to engage with them through their local language. And we can see from the slide on the screen, it does cut out your shortlist capabilities. They're less likely to consider you on the shortlist if you're not engaging with them in language. So in order to bring some light into how we can use a researcher's engagement and intent to inform our marketing strategies and to inform our sales outreach, I'd like to welcome our marketing panel on the stage. We have Colin Mann, Global Campaigns Manager from Mitel, and Tom Campbell, Global Marketing Operations Manager from Yellowfin BI. Good morning, and welcome. Okay, so I'll start off with the first question. Thank you very much for joining us. Can you give us an overview of your current marketing strategy and goals?
Sure. So for us, I work for a company called Yellowfin, and we're an analytics vendor. And we compete in a space where it's a very crowded market. There's a lot of vendors in there, and we compete against the likes of SAP, Microsoft, IBM. And we're a small company, so we're 120 globally. And that means we've got to do things slightly different. We can't compete with these guys on AdWords spend or share of voice in the media. So we've got to do things a little bit different. And what we try to do is, a couple of years ago, we hired an excellent content writer who's in the audience today, And she's been producing some fantastic content, and for us it's just about getting that content in front of people at the right time and delivering them the right content. And I guess the intent data has really been key to that. So that's kind of our key strategy around this.
Okay, so I work for Mitel, which is a B2B communications provider, so telecoms. We sell indirectly through a network of channel partners. And the market that I'm in is in a big state of change. There's a lot of mergers and acquisitions. I think we've bought 3, 4, 5 companies ourselves. But also there's a big transition away from traditional phone systems towards cloud. And it's that transition towards cloud and unified communications as a service that actually informs quite a lot of our marketing strategy. And a lot of the profiles we've built on Priority Engine are all based around those kind of themes. So we have a field marketing team. They work with our channel partners. I'm demand generation for EMEA and APAC. Top of funnel stuff, emails, content syndication, paid search, you name it, we do it. And then there's a handshake where we hand over to the BDR team, or telemarketing if you prefer to call them that, and then they take it to the opportunity stage. So the Priority Engine, I don't want to get ahead to your next question here, which I know is coming, but Priority Engine for me is really around segmenting around those cloud-based themes, because that's where the market for us is at. And I think that's probably true for quite a lot of people in B2B marketing. Mm-hmm. There's a transition in all sorts of industries towards software and service-based technologies.
Yeah. So how did you come to decide on your key intent segmentation? Was it strictly a marketing-led decision, or was it a collaboration between marketing and sales?
Well, I guess for us, it was kind of in 3 phases, this. So when we first got Priority Engine, which was the first tool we used for intent data, but when we first got it, I didn't really want to waste any time. So I just kind of went through, knowing the audience as I do, I went through and built a lot of profiles for different segments within Priority Engine, and that generated us some contacts immediately, so we could start our program straight away. Then we sat down with sales across the different regions, and we understood what their focus was, who they were looking to target. So built out additional profiles for them. And then thirdly, I think that the really important part for us was working with the regional marketing managers as well, so that when they run their different campaigns, they think about using Priority Engine as part of their campaign as well. So, they run different campaigns around different topics, and Priority Engine's key for us to be able to get additional contacts to support those marketing efforts for those topics. So those were the 3 kind of phases we went through to generate that.
Great.
So I'm going to answer that by saying that mainly it's neither. It's strategy for us, because we know the market is transitioning towards cloud. We've therefore got some metrics and goals based around that in terms of pipeline and revenue targets. So actually the profiles that we've built and the marketing segmentation we do right across the board is really based around achieving those strategic goals. We do have some sales-led initiatives where they might have come to us and said we have a vertical market we want to support and a particular solution we want to pitch. But generally we try and allow ourselves to be led by the strategy more than our own input and more than the sales input. And one of the reasons for that is because I'm in demand generation. The risk with demand generation is you become too tactical. Yeah. And you become just about hitting an MQL number, and you become very tactical and just load a load of content syndication leads into the system, and you've hit your number for the month. And what I want to avoid is that kind of much more tactical, reactive type marketing. So we let sales have a voice. They do give us some targeting around particular vertical markets that we follow, and we build some profiles and segmentation around that. But it's always we always go back to the strategy. And going back to the strategy is also my tool for saying no as well. If sales come to me and say, I want to do this, that's my way of saying no. That's not in line with the strategic needs of the company. So it's a little bit of marketing, a little bit of sales, but mainly going back to the strategic objectives set by the board.
Okay, fair enough. How has marketing intent data helped you enable your sales organization?
I'll go first this time. Let's shake it up a bit. Rebels, sorry. So for us, our sales teams, our sales leaders are big advocates of the challenger sales methodology. Now, for a lot of you will be familiar with that, but the Challenger sales methodology basically says what you've got to do is not pitch a solution to a customer, pitch an idea. You talk to a customer about how you can help them transform their business, and you introduce ideas they may not have thought of themselves. So really you become the expert really in how you can actually transform their part of the business, as we should be. For us, with business-to-business communication, we should be able to go to a customer and say, in your market, this is what we've seen and this is how you should change. With the Challenger sales methodology, what that requires, therefore, is not selling to a decision maker. You have to sell to a decision-making community. And that only increases the larger the company is that you're selling into. Yeah, because obviously once you get into an enterprise company, you're looking at 8 to 10, 12, 15, people who are involved in the process. And that's a big transition for us, and I think that's a big transition for marketing. Traditionally, we've always gone after a single point of contact, the most senior IT person who actually signs the check or makes the decision. Now we're going after influencers, customer experience directors, maybe even marketing and HR with certain solutions. We're after the whole buying chain. So when it comes to things like using intent data, this is where Priority Engine in particular is really good, because we can see the whole buying community. We can see that an admin contact's gone on this date and has done some research. Suddenly there's the IT decision making going on. Suddenly the MD appears in the data later on. So what it's enabling us to do is really market to that whole decision making community that we really need to reach, so that we're actually identifying decision makers and influencers and reaching out to the whole community. That for us in B2B is a really powerful tool that we're leveraging.
So for us, the most useful aspect of it has been able to provide the sales team kind of insight and intelligence that they didn't have before. So in terms of, before we used to just send over a list of leads and they used to just follow them up, but now they get additional insight into that lead, what they've been researching. And the hope is that they will follow up accordingly based on that insight, and so they can have better conversations. Because as we saw the stats, if you're sending content or having conversations about stuff that they're researching, you're more likely to get a better response rate, and we've definitely seen that. And certainly our more successful salespeople use that information in a really smart way to tailor those emails and those conversations that they have with their prospects. So I think that's been the most useful aspect to help engage the sales team in that.
Great, thank you. And last question, and then we'll open up to the floor. What has been the most successful sales engagement and relationship building element in your marketing strategy?
So I think if we look at it from a marketing point of view, because we've set up nurture tracks so that when we export contacts from Priority Engine, they go into nurture tracks and marketing nurtures them. Because we have a small sales team, it's only really we send through really highly qualified leads through to the sales team. So those nurture tracks are really important to nurture those leads to get to that point. And I think what we've seen with the intent data that we're using is just the levels of engagement that we're seeing from those people in those nurture teams outperforms other nurture tracks, 3 to 1. So just the response from a marketing point of view, that the context that we're engaging with are now a lot more engaged with our content because we know to deliver them the right content at the right time. So that's been really helpful from a marketing point of view. And I guess from a sales point of view, it's probably a similar story that they now have that information that they can follow up us, so they have better conversations. And as I said, the better salespeople are having those more informed conversations based on the intent that they've got. Great.
And actually, to be honest, I would echo that. The intent data that we've used has really helped us to inform the way we're doing nurture with things like email nurture and some of the paid search stuff and the web advertising we do. But also the contextual information, as Tom already mentioned, that we pass over to the BDRs is really critical to helping them do their jobs. We then append it. They use LinkedIn Sales Navigator as well, so they add on some additional context and information. So by the time it actually arrives with the BDR, they've pretty much got a good sense of somebody's in market, researching topics, multiple contacts, good sense of the profile of the company, and actually it's really optimizing their performance as well. which is great for that sales and marketing alignment. If we're helping them, they're helping us, everybody's a winner.
Sure. Thank you. Let's open up for questions from the audience. Does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask? Go ahead. I will bring you a microphone right now.
Hi, Miglen Alexandrova from Cisco. Just a quick question on the leads that you actually send directly to sales after they have been highly qualified, as you said. Yeah, maybe first question is, how do you make sure with this nurture stream that they're highly qualified? Do you telequalify them?
So in our case, we're handing leads over in a number of different ways. So the majority of the leads that we would hand over via marketing have been engaged with on some level. So there might be, we try and aim for 3 or 4 touch points before we actually pass somebody to a BDR. So there's a level of marketing qualification. And then our BDRs will obviously then add an additional layer of qualification through what they do. Interestingly, with Priority Engine, we do that. We take the data and use it in other marketing tactics as well. Email nurture, we give it to our web company for advertising, online account-based marketing, etc. But we do also pass some of it directly. So we actually take some of the data from Priority Engine and hand it straight over to our BDRs. So no additional marketing touch points on those. And we define the segmentation very tightly, so we're not spamming them with hundreds and hundreds of contacts, but we've built the profiles quite tightly, and we hand over a small segment directly to those BDRs. And that, in all honesty, that's been the most successful tactic so far in terms of pipeline. By doing that, we've generated several $1 million of pipeline just from handing this data straight over, which to me speaks to one of the differentiators for Priority Engine, which is the quality of the data. My experience of the quality of the data has been good, and that's why we do that.
Yeah, I guess a similar story for me. So we use a lead scoring model, so when people hit a threshold based on our lead scoring model, they then get passed over to the sales team to follow up. So that means that they've engaged with us on a few different levels. But similar to you, we've also sent some raw contacts from Priority Engine based on if they're reviewing late-stage content or they're showing those signals that actually they look like they're in the further down the line in the buying journey. So yeah, we do both tactics, and similar to the contacts we're sending straight from Priority Engine seem to work quite well as well. So I think that's.
So one of the things we're working on next is, I think Tom's probably a little further ahead with this, is actually aligning content to each stage of the buyer's journey. So at the moment, and we're going to start looking at how we do that with Priority Engine. So if somebody's at an awareness stage, let's send them an appropriate piece of content. So we're looking at structurally how we do that in Marketo and Salesforce. So I'm interested in learning, particularly the ABM session later is going to be very informative for me around that.
Absolutely. Oh, we've got a couple of questions here. Let's get you a microphone very quickly. Hold on.
How is GDPR going to impact your results?
Over to you, Colin.
Yeah, so we said beforehand we're going to get questions on GDPR, we guarantee it. Difficult to know how it's going to impact our results yet. I think it will have, it's going to have a substantial impact on email marketing, particularly. There's some e-privacy regulations that are coming as well, further down the line. So I think we're going to see, definitely with email marketing, you've obviously got to get your own legal advice. Anything I say here, legal disclaimer alert. But certainly within our business, we're going to move to an opt-in model. And I think that will definitely cause us to see probably theoretically, some drop-off in performance of email marketing. However, there's evidence out there of other companies that have moved to opt-in, where they've actually seen an uplift in performance from things like email nurture because they've gone opt-in. Because obviously, logically, if somebody's on your stream, they've opted in to receive it. So I think what might happen, and I'm speculating a little bit, I think we might see a lower volume of marketing qualified leads, but a higher quality threshold on the leads that do appear with the sales team. That's where my kind of head's at with the whole process. So I'm expecting a dip in NQLs and an increase in quality after GDPR, if we do it right.
Yeah, exactly the same as you, Colin. I'm thinking there'll be less volume but better quality. I keep reading that it's going to make us better as marketers, and it's a bit of a cliche now, but I think it's very true that it's forcing us to be better engaging with people that are actually want to be engaged with and delivering them content they actually want. So I think it's going to force us to be better. And what's interesting for me is that I work with marketing managers in North America and APAC, and they're asking if they need to be GDPR compliant, and of course, but it's not a question of being compliant for me, it's just a question of being better as a marketer. How do we want to improve our processes? And I think that's the key way to look at it, rather than trying to be compliant. It's just we want to be better and be more relevant to our audience, so that's key.
I think it's going to cause an interesting change in the tactical mix as well. We might see some old school tactics coming back to the fore. So things like events, which have died a little bit. You know, they've declined a bit in various industries, event marketing. I think we'll probably see a comeback for events, because if you get your opt-in right on the stand, you've got opt-in. So it'd be interesting to see, you know, how the tactical mix will change over time. One thing I would highly recommend is, and it's common sense really, if we're going to have GDPR and there's e-privacy regulations coming as well further down the line, we've got to all move towards inbound as much as we possibly can. And you know, change that ratio from outbound to inbound just that little bit more.
Great. I believe we had another question over there first.
I have a big enough voice, but I'll use this. Colin and Tom. Colin, you mentioned Sales Navigator, LinkedIn Sales Navigator. Can you talk a little bit more about the data that is coming from Priority Engine, and then what your sales teams or folks are doing then with any connection to LinkedIn Sales Navigator?
I can talk a little bit, but I have to be honest, I don't use Navigator myself, so my familiarity with the tool is pretty limited. But I can tell you what our business development rep team do when they get a lead from us, is that they don't immediately call it unless there's a specific time, an appointment booked. They are then going into other tools that they use, like LinkedIn Sales Navigator, and sorry, DiscoverOrg. And they're going into other data tools as well, and they are then appending into Salesforce an organisational structure, additional contacts they find, any evidence of behaviour that they find using tools like LinkedIn. So they're building up an additional picture over and above what we're providing to them. Because essentially in marketing, we're providing to them marketing qualified leads. Well, what is an MQL? It's basically a form that's being filled out and somebody has raised their hand in some way. That's not sales ready. So the BDR team then need to add additional context to it, profile, structure, additional contacts, and turn it into a sales ready lead. So I know that's not quite a full answer because I'm not familiar enough with LinkedIn Sales Navigator. But what I can tell you is our BDRs are adding additional context to the stuff we produce before it then gets handed over to a salesperson.
Yeah. To be honest, I mean, we're just at the start of our journey for LinkedIn Sales Navigator, so I don't really have anything to add there.
We have a question here.
So in the first presentation, we heard a little bit about what sales want in terms of timescale from the lead being created to when they actually follow up. Have you got SLAs with sales in place in your organisations, and have you noticed a difference from the time from when you do the lead to when they follow it up, making a difference to the pipeline?
Yes, I mean, certainly we notice a difference. We don't have SLAs established yet, but it's where we want to get to as we work through our different processes. But yeah, we've certainly seen a difference. Obviously, the quicker the follow-up, the more engaged the user is. It makes sense.
So we have 4 tiers, and there's different SLAs for each. So a tier 1 lead would be something like a contact us now form or a request for a demo. And we actually make sales follow those up in 5 minutes, theoretically. And the reason for that is because when you're transitioning to a cloud-based industry, if people are buying cloud-based solutions, they just want to go online, stick in how many users they want, how many phones they want, so they need fast follow-up. And then we have tier 2 and tier 3, and I think tier 2, I've got Alexi, who's my automation man here, he's going to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think tier 2 is 24 hours, and then tier 3 I think is 72, and then tier 4 is more of a nurture. And it's all based on, so content syndication, for example, I think falls into tier 3 for us, which is a 72-hour follow-up, I think. So I might have the SLA numbers wrong there, but essentially we do have these tiers based on the quality and the urgency of the lead that goes over, and sales have to then stick to those timings.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. We'll get to the 2 questions over there, and then we'll be good.
Hi, Colin. You mentioned earlier that increasingly it's a community of decision makers and stakeholders that you need to be convincing and influencing. Do you ever introduce your salespeople who, I suppose, end up holding those high value relationships with those key stakeholders? Do you ever introduce them earlier in the process, perhaps circumnavigating the BDRs, in the interest of improving efficiency and not letting these key people getting lost in the process? Do you ever introduce those key salespeople that then end up holding the high value relationships? Do you ever introduce them earlier?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We do sometimes. So a lot of the time, most of our marketing leads will go via BDRs. We do occasionally route certain leads to our high-touch sales team, and that might include certain larger campaigns with larger companies. We might route directly, because when it comes to the larger enterprise campaigns that we might run for companies with, say, 1,000 employees plus, then really we're not using BANT methodology. We're using CHAMP methodology, which is a slightly different kind of method, where you're actually not necessarily saying we know the budget, we know the timescale and all of that. You're actually saying, here's a company with a set of challenges, and we think that there's something there we can solve. And when it comes to those larger companies and also public sector, the sales team want to get in quite early as they possibly can. So for those, we do occasionally route them directly to salespeople and actually get them involved earlier on. There's an operational answer to your question as well, of course. If a load of data is going over in Salesforce to a BDR, how do you then make that visible to the salesperson? Because a BDR will then convert a lead to an opportunity, but that opportunity will be with one contact. So you then have to, operationally, you do have to then have a look at how you provide the additional contact within that single view. Because no salesperson I've ever met is going to go and look at 5 or 6 different records in Salesforce to get to that one opportunity. So there's an operational issue there that you've got to then add that additional contact information, contextual information to the opportunity that the salespeople are doing.
And I think we had one question back there as well. I think that's our last question. We're almost out of time.
Morning, gents. Just a quick question around if you've had any struggles with the mindset change for your BDRs. Maybe 2 years ago, you would have been passing them leads and it would have been, this customer probably wants to buy this. Now you're asking them to do a lot more of their homework on the account based on intent data, maybe what they're finding in LinkedIn Navigator. You're asking them to do a lot more thinking before they pick up the phone to the customer. Has that been a struggle in terms of what you're passing them and the intelligence and the thought you're asking them to apply to something before they pick up the phone? And if so, how have you dealt with that?
Yeah, I think that the really important thing is to get them engaged early on. When you look at an intent data provider, you get them engaged in the meetings and training early on so they know about the tool, they know how to use it, and just understanding the best practices for follow-up. I think the feedback I've had from the BDRs is just that they're excited to work with information, the additional information that they get through intent data. So I don't see it as they see it as more work, harder work. I think they're grateful for having that extra information so they can have better conversations. And if we try and explain that it'll help their conversion rates, then they're appreciative of that. I mean, if I think back to 5-10 years ago, we used to send our BDRs just cold lists. So I think they see the value now in these data lists versus the previous ones. I think, so I think to summarize, it's just training and get them engaged and bought into the intent data early on.
So I wouldn't say it's been a struggle in our case, but what we definitely have had to do is look at the number of leads that they can actually process. Because if they're obviously having to add additional information and do more qualification, that's going to reduce the number of leads they can get through. And it's also made them more picky in a good way. We get a lot more feedback now. This lead wasn't of sufficient quality. So we're getting a lot more constructive criticism around the quality of the leads we're generating. So I would say there's been some positive impacts from it, but certainly you've got to look at making sure that you've got the right number of leads going in. We had a situation last year where I think we reached the end of the year, we had 4,000 not attempted leads. Well, that's wasted money. So we've reduced the number of leads that we're delivering this year to account for that.
Yep. I've been told one more question.
Hi, this is Monica from Cisco. You previously mentioned that you forward some leads directly to BDRs and some to nurture, and you have seen success following giving these leads directly to BDR. So how do you segregate which goes to nurture and which goes directly, and making sure there's a connection in all these leads for the same account, so they're working on accounts instead of like individual leads at different times and touching all the people at different time, and maybe, you know, not such a good thing?
Yeah, that's a good question, because the way Salesforce is set up, if you generate a lead in one place and then generate it in another, it could appear twice in Salesforce, and you may end up duplicating activity. The leads we pass to BDRs, we've done nothing particularly clever there. We've essentially just defined very, very tight criteria based around the themes that we're interested in, the geography, the company sizes, to make sure that the pot of those is small enough to hand over. So it's nothing particularly clever that we've done. It's just really, really tightly defining our target audience right down to the nth degree, and only passing those ones over. And then everything else outside of that, we exclude those from the email nurture. And then everything else outside of that then gets added to things like nurture processes. So we don't get duplicates. The key for us is just making sure that we've segmented it really, really tightly. I think that's the key to most of marketing, to be honest, is data segmentation is 80% of the battle.
Yeah, and I think certainly your point with priority engines, segmentation is really key to get the most out of it, as we've seen. But so what we do is we send the people who are viewing late stage content through to into our Marketo system, and then we tag them so that then when they're pushed into Salesforce, they go into a certain bucket that we know certain people will follow up on those contacts. So it's just a case of tagging them correctly and setting the systems up. But that's how we do it.
Great. Well, I'd like to thank you, Tom and Colin, for your very helpful insight. And we will